Let's bring up Ion. We can grill them.
Yay!
How are you doing? How are you guys doing?
So. The whole idea of leaving the room was really something that the AUG council said. We didn't mean it. We were kidding. You know, Mike said to us, they want everybody to be partners, including the vendors, and we all want to partner together. So please stay, give your input.
No, we welcome the input, and thank you for pulling this together. I mean, kudos to the entire council. I know Jen from Repsol isn't here, but I know she played a huge role in doing this, and you all put together a great show. Yay! And great job getting the band back together. So this is the first time I get to meet the band, and I would be happy to be part of the band. I think you guys know most of the folks on the stage here. I'm Mike Robber, by the way. I think I've met many of you, probably virtually as well. But we got Dawson, who you've heard already, and Ben, Richard Murphy. We haven't talked much about liquids today, but he would be the man if we did. And of course, Nazar. And there are others here too. I don't know if Raj Sentimil is still in the room, but he's overseeing our automation tools. So ATA, that's Raj. And of course, we have Kevin Kirshner and Tyler Templin sitting here, and he works with many of you guys from the account management side. Okay. But no, we're really excited that you guys have come back together. We have, great appreciation for everything that you bring to the table. I mean, the obvious goal here, and I think you've said it more than once, Brooke, is we want to make the product better. We obviously want to make the product better as well. And we get input from market advancements. We have an industry solutions team that keeps their fingers on the pulse of the market. We know technology advancements, but certainly the number one priority, for us is listening to our customers and understanding where really our customers expect the product to go in the future, because you guys represent our market. So, one thing I'd like to do, really, we're here to field questions, right, to start with, but from my perspective, you guys have started, and maybe this is a springboard, right, doing a great job of bubbling up the what, right? What is it that you guys really want to see in the product? And maybe to some extent, why, right? We want to hear, why is this so important to you? What are the business cases that are really driving this, right? But how do we work together and collaborate as a team from, a working group standpoint and even beyond, right, to move forward with a lot of the ideas that have been progressed here today amongst you all just through dialogue. And we can do better and more than just dialogue going forward. So I look forward to continuing this, and moving forward with you all on these types of working groups. So that's kind of all I wanted to say to start. I know everyone's kind of waiting to ask questions, but maybe I can open it up, and there's probably other points that I want to make that I'll make as we talk through some of the topics that you'd like to press on.
Taylor, AES. You mentioned we haven't talked liquids today. I would love to point a question in that direction. Load shapes for solids and liquids. I know it's been on the roadmap for a long time. Is it still on the roadmap? Is there a plan for it?
So the load shape architecture actually
It's not working.
The load shape architecture was built that you should be able to use it for liquids actually. So there's nothing preventing that.
In what version?
There's nothing that there's nothing that should preclude being able to use load shape for liquids. And it wasn't built to be restricted, for instance, to gas or power. One way I could see to use it, for instance, is production profiles potentially for leases would be a potential.
Yeah, we get the question from our users for our coal assets, for our for consumption forecasts.
Yeah, you should. Kim Blomwald, who coded originally, said that it was written in a way where it should be able to work if you try and use it for liquids.
Financial terms.
Yeah.
Should work, not physical.
See, but that's what I want.
Yeah.
At this point.
Ms. R doesn't have the mic, but
Yeah, at this point, it does not work for physical solid or liquids. So yeah, it's going to require
Will it?
data model change of the process. It's really up to all in all, if that becomes a needed function in the system, and we see many companies are requiring that, then of course it'll bubble up in the priority list that we have for roadmaps. If we have one customer asking for it, then it's not a priority. I mean, we want to move the product in a way where multiple customers can take advantage of it. So if it's a one-off, so to speak, we recommend a class event route. Whether we build it or a third party will build it, or we have the expertise to build it. After a while, if we see ourselves using the same class event with multiple customers, then we say maybe it's time to move it to core code. But at this point, really, it never bubbled to that is a priority feature in the system.
Thanks.
So on that note, when it comes to roadmaps, can you go through the timing of ION's roadmap and when or how AUG is to submit things to you? And what time frame we have to be able to do that, and how we'll be interacting to do it? What's going to make it there?
yeah, sure. I think how we interact is still TBD, right? I mean, you guys can submit anything, anytime, right? The question is then, how do we take that, understand the value of it, understand, to Nazar's point, is it a one-off request and nobody else would really use it? Or is this something that, we have 52 users, across many different companies that are actually asking for this? It would be valuable for future companies. And yeah, of course, we would bubble it up and prioritize it, right? But for us, understanding the need, right, and why that need exists is first and foremost. Yeah, and then, as we look at, okay, now what's the timing, which was part of your question. There's no timing like the present to start working on building out a roadmap, right? Getting it, scheduled and developed is a function of, the timing of, your scope deadlines and when's the code, we'll call it code freeze, when does, regression and, and that period start before the release. So I would say, if you're asking me, hey, is there any way we're going to get something in the next release, V23? Probably not, right? So we're thinking about what can we start working on that's going to be important for you all next year. Now, that being said, what was great to hear today was some validation on some of the things that we are developing. And I think Ben made the point about the forward curve composite decomposition. That was one big thing. There were a couple others too that I was very excited to hear about, but certainly.
On that note, just from an AUG user perspective, it is very important that we hear your voice, you guys. And it's not just here at conference. We need to hear your voice. And by that, we mean when I was talking about working groups, when I was talking about having a nat gas session or a technology session, we need you guys to show up to those with your voices. As a council, our intent, again, TBD, but our intent is to bring all of these topics together then, and we will have a voting process that we fully intend to implement. That's going to be you guys voting so that they do know it's 50 people wanting it or 50 companies wanting it and not one. That's the point. We need to be heard through the AUG and do that process. So just keep that in mind. You guys are important to this.
I think that's actually something we did in a smaller scale in the European AUG. So it's really just that part of the room. But they came up with 20-25 requirements. I think they had a number of points per company and they started allocating to the different requirements. That really helped us. And also what helped us is to know exactly what the customer wants or what the customer wants. Because sometimes, and we see that, we fix something for a customer that breaks it for the other. And that's, if we can have this consensus, if we can talk to each other before, we can actually understand the requirements and do it right for both.
And that's exactly why we want our working groups, because we want them to work with you to figure out how we're going to do it then as they come up through the group.
And I just want to follow up on something that, on Tiffany's comment about the working groups and that kind of stuff. We need your voices. And the reason we need your voices is because if I bring something to the table, you may not realize that it's something, hey, this would be, something I like. Or this, I hadn't even gotten to that point in my process yet, so I don't know about it. Or that has happened, it's happened once or twice. I didn't realize that it could be a reoccurring issue or that type of thing. So that's why when we have working groups, when we have the AUG meetings, all of that kind of stuff, having you there listening is vital to the improvement of this product.
I think this morning so we were talking about this issue and this function about the disaggregation of a composite used on the forward index. Now, I received an email again this morning, even before the session, someone wanted to talk to me just about that. We designed the feature yesterday or 2 days ago. But further discussion, someone else actually mentioned the possibility to use the composite on an option. This is exactly the type of requirements we would have missed.
We need that.
But if no one tell us, if there is no, when you capture an issue with your support rep and it ends up being an enhancement, it's actually getting reviewed, right? Believe it or not, we review it when we look at the roadmap.
I'm going to call Dawson out on this one because I've talked to him about this option break.
But my point is not on this specific. Obviously, we're going to look at this specific now that we're going to do the design. But before today, it would have been just excluded. Would have worked with the 3 use cases we have and would have made it work for the 3 use cases we have.
Yeah, now we have a 4th, but we're going to be missing the 5th, unfortunately.
To kind of expand on this point, I heard a couple of times here that, yeah, we came across an issue with actuals bringing us an extra row or the past status is not set right, but we have our own view to go correct the data. I prefer that you report these issues because if we don't know about them, we think it's perfectly working for everybody. So it's report the issue. Sometimes we may or may not be able to fix it, but at least us knowing that there's an issue in that area allow us to pay more attention to it.
One of the reasons when we report issues, we get back at, you're not on the right version, you need to upgrade. So we'll fix this in the next release. I've been developing software for 25 years. I've used those excuses. When you can put hot patches, e-fixes out there and support the version that we're on. We sell software. Everyone in the room has a different version. It's a universal piece of software that's built. We'll have to try to fit into it. But I think the excuse of upgrading doesn't really help us because then we need to spend thousands of hours in refactoring those class events that took us 2 years to create, 3 years to create. So even one upgrade would cost us 18 months to 2 years. It's a great stall tactic, don't get me wrong, but how do we work better with support to deliver the issue to them, wrap it up, get it fixed, and brought back? I'm actually receiving emails from Jira on stuff that I reported back in 2019 that are finally being closed out just because they haven't heard from us. So
there's really no yes and no answer here. It depends of the type of issue that you're reporting. Now, if it's a gap or an enhancement, a usability, then typically we say no. I mean, it's something we took care in a higher version, but we cannot start porting back features because that will destabilize the version that you're on and nobody else wants it. We definitely try to avoid making any data model changes, visual model changes, changes in processes within a released version because we have other customers using it, building interfaces on it, set their views accordingly. So we avoid doing this. Now, if you're talking about a defect and critical defects, we absolutely have an escalation process. But if you have a bug that is affecting your business process, you have to report it, escalate it, and we have a release schedule for older versions that we fix in older versions, and we provide these releases. So I'm not sure if there's a misunderstanding of a process or the categorization of the reported issues. But if it's definitely a critical defect that is affecting your business process, we want to hear about it, and we typically correct these as a maintenance update, and it's scheduled throughout the year.
Hi, I wanted to add on to the gentleman's question just now about patching. We have the exact same kind of concerns in regards to patching. Whenever we do take one, oftentimes what we notice is more things end up being breaking, things that were working before, and it really breaks more than it fixed, right? So for the issues that are one-off, I completely understand that, let's stick with the upgrade, stick with the release. But for the more common issues, as we were talking earlier about version 5.2 and 5.3, where the credit module, whenever someone invoices, drops all of that exposure from the forward exposure, causing people not to be able to use it at all. So for these very common high critical issues, it's not viable for us to upgrade to a whole new release just for this one thing. Is it possible for the ION group to create class events or something a little more stomachable to where we can do minimal testing independent of everything else and then get it back to us?
That is the recommended approach. If you're asking for a added feature or a better usability, that is a recommended approach, is to do it in a class event, because it will reduce the risk of making any changes and potentially affect other part of the application or may cause other defects. So definitely that's what we recommend.
Sorry, I guess the point was to make it like a standard class event that you can take as part of 5.2 instead of going through the whole scoping process and giving consultants and TNE to actually build it out.
So we actually do, right? So I can tell you dozens of class events are sent to customers every week. Well, maybe every month, but just to fix that, because it's very difficult and dangerous to fix something in a version that is used by all the other customers in an e-patch. And what happens is the e-patch, you're going to take it and that's going to work for you, but that's going to be 6 months ago when another customer upgrades to the same e-patch or the same branch of your e-patch, and that breaks something, which we're going to fix there. And the next time you upgrade to an e-patch, that's not going to be broken. So that's quite dangerous. Every time we can, we build class events and we share it with customers. Make it a standard class event, it depends. Most of the times we keep it in our support group and we share it when the customer has the issue.
So what will be the escalation process to get these kind of quote unquote standardized class events? Because the specific one we just talked about on the credit module, we've actually kind of requested, and the guidance to us is that we might need to go through the Allegro consulting arm of things to have it built out.
Well, so it depends if that's a functionality that was broken or that's a functionality that never existed. So that's usually what we use to classify the type of issue. So if it was working in the previous version and it stopped working, then typically that would be considered as a defect. If it's a new functionality, or sometimes so imagine that now you start trading LNG. I mean, maybe you trade LNG, I don't know, but if you start trading LNG in your current version, you've never traded LNG, and then you say, hey, this is not working. Here we may recommend an upgrade because we fixed functionality for LNG in other version. So porting everything back because you want to start implementing it, it's not the right approach. Now, on that specific credit exposure falling, I'm not aware of that. I don't know if Dawson is, but we can look at it and look what happened on that one.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So, okay, Andres first. One quick question. At some point when Horizon was in development, the class events themselves, from a DevOps perspective, is kind of a pain to manage because they're all in the database, and at some point there was ideas of exposing them like .cs or taking them out, and you could do unit testing, do everything like any other DevOps shop. right now it's time to deploy them and all that. It's very painful. You have to go through the UI to move them in, out. You can't, test against them. It kind of becomes a little bit, is there any thought in the future for better, and even for Ion themselves, for you guys to be managing them and testing all this custom code that is distributed among everybody, or these standard class events are not part of your code to kind of become more like a DevOps type?
I'll just say one thing, that there's a customer in this room that has an very extensive extension that was built, and it is in the core code in V22. So it was a great extension for dealing with crude marketing, and now it's actually part of the core code. So we are actually trying to move extensions and class events that have applicability to multiple customers into the core code, so when you take a new release, you actually get that class event or extension automatically.
So what happens when I have 1,500 to 1,700 class events and I'm on version 5.3, and let's say you brought that into 5.6? What's the process for me as a guy who runs an IT department to invest time and money to examine build 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, figure out the differences of what Ion decided to put now into the newest build? So if I went to take the newest build and get to the latest and greatest, it's a full back test. How would I know what you take out versus take in? What's the easiest approach to understand what's in my version versus what's in someone like Jack's version? I know what I have, they know what they have, and it becomes really, really, really hard to back test.
Yeah, so I'll let Nazar add on to this, but there's actually a document that actually steps through 901 or something like that, and steps through every single subsequent version and says what the major enhancements were that were included in that version. So it can give you some idea. If there's something where you used to do a class event for, you can see, hey, now we've got this built into the core code. Then you can have a discussion with us about whether that is, a class event that maybe the core code doesn't do exactly what you want it to do, but it'll give you a clue of what you need to look at on that.
So the quick answer is it's not easy. I agree with you. So typically our recommendation as part of the upgrade, any system class event embedded in our default XML files that get tested, obviously. You're talking about all the custom class events, and these typically categorize differently. If you have custom class event related to external systems, and you have to reevaluate these, right? If they're class events that you generated as a stopgap for a defect, typically our basic recommendation, anytime you create a class event for a defect, categorize it differently. The idea is you should be able easily to find them. Anytime you upgrade, turn them all off. That should be your starting point. You keep the system class events. You keep the class events that are related to external systems or a data lake, really not related to the application directly. Turn off all the class events that were generated just for pure defects, and that should be your starting point. And then you may be able to turn some of them back on if that issue isn't resolved. So it's a process. As Richard says, we typically provide a technical document with every major release. So you should be able to review that. So we're trying to keep everything backward compatible. We don't change API much, or the number of parameters, or remove methods out. But sometimes we have to do that as a part of a rewrite of a particular module or a product. We provide a technical document to say this method was deprecated or was moved to a different class, and that's the new class name. So make it easier for you to scan and kind of replace the class name or the method name. We're trying to avoid it for this particular process, but when we have to do it, we document it so you will know what you have to do as you upgrade your class events.
The question from online, Are those docs posted on the knowledge base site, and how do clients go about getting them?
They're really, with every release folder, we include these, so if you reach out to your support analyst, they can provide these documents for you.
The fact that knowledge base was brought up is just going to lead me into what I believe is going to be a new platform, right? Client Connect?
Yep.
Can you guys talk a little bit about when that's expected to go live, or what it's going to be different?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can tell you what the timing is for go live, like actually when it's going to be open for everyone. We're currently in a test phase, so I don't know who specifically from the council is actually
All of us
involved in it.
council are in it.
Okay, everyone in the council, very good. And I know it just started. We probably need, some rounds of feedback and understanding, what issues that we're having that need to be resolved, right? That would be considered blockers for us to consider to have it go live for you all. And the existing knowledge base will continue to be out there with the material that is in a read-only basis once that does happen. But we will look to port as much as we can into the new Client Connect, including the documents that were made available with releases and other documentation that should be available online as well.
When is the new release coming out? The New Horizon release?
V23 is scheduled to come out this fall. Let's say November 15 or so, but we haven't picked a specific date.
I can't remember if you have not slept in a while, but for V24, when would council need to have, when would the AUG need to have the recommended things for development?
Yeah.
Has that ship sailed? Or?
No. V24.
V23 is coming out.
Scope is wide open right now
Okay.
for V24, of course.
When does that close?
We probably should
Best guess.
get together and talk about having some assessment of scope that we can vote on and prioritize before the end of the year, maybe January timeframe. Yeah. But it's also going to depend on specifically other factors and what else is going into the release. I don't think this is working. Here it is. Maybe I'm not speaking into it. But what else is potentially going into the release, and how much capacity we have to deliver items that are essentially prioritized up through the AUG. As I said earlier, no time like the present to get started. Certainly the sooner the better. It gives us more opportunity, certainly to put more into V24. But if I had to put my finger in the air and say we should be in a position where we're reviewing and voting and deciding what's at the top of the list, I would say by the end of the year.
So how do we see the current roadmaps and what's on them now?
We can present a roadmap to you. I wasn't prepared, obviously.
Yep.
And we didn't talk about having it in this meeting, but we can do something virtually. We would typically do that with you anyway. And I think when we have our Ion Commodities client connection meetings, we'll certainly have opportunities there as well. I don't know, we have scheduled several commodity specific connection meetings that will happen this year. Unfortunately, not in Houston, but we have several that are scheduled towards the end of the year in Asia and Europe. We will be having one in Houston in the early part of 2024. We haven't picked a date, but think April-ish timeframe.
So that being an ION conference, do you know if AUG is going to be able to tag on a day at the end of it like we used to? We used to, where if you had a 2-day or 3-day conference, we'd take day 4.
Yeah, we should discuss what makes sense from an AUG standpoint, because it would be not specifically only Allegro at the ION conference, although we would definitely target specific presentations and meetings potentially for Allegro only, but it would make sense to have a piggyback meeting with the AUG, especially in a location like Houston, right? That would make a lot of sense. But something for us to discuss and plan, I would say.
I would imagine in the next standing committee sessions that will likely get held online, I would say within the next, 3 months or so, all of our fabulous liaisons will schedule some sort of session. And my guess is the first topic at hand is going to be presentation specific from them with their roadmaps then. That way we know where to generate ideas and topics from that. Other questions for Ion?
Hi, this is Floranda with Osaka Gas USA. I'm not sure if any other people here have experienced this issue, but currently we are having an issue with submitting trades to eConfirm from primary economics term PET. So I was just wondering if you've noticed any users having connectivity issues with ICE. I know they've updated and upgraded their servers back in December, so I'm not sure if anyone's having that issue, but we're unable to currently submit trades. We keep getting this error. We've raised the issue to Ion as well. We've worked with Karen. We've seen this issue since around February. It happens sporadically. Sometimes we're able to submit, sometimes we're not. It consistently gives us this error. It's called a response code 0 error. So just curious to know or hear your thoughts on this.
I'm not sure anybody else having similar issues, or?
You reported the issues, I assume, as you get them, or?
Yes.
Through
yes.
support, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, she's talking with him, so if somebody's gonna fix it, it's him. So he's a superstar, so.
Mind boggled,
Right.
really.
So what we typically do in situations like this, we typically modify the code slightly to collect more information or logging if the existing logging is not clear enough. I'm not sure he went through that, but I will confirm that with him. So typically we look at the existing logs when that error happens to see, are we seeing something in the background that is causing that issue? If it's still not clear, we'll start adding kind of deep level logging over. There's a configuration in the config file where you can lower that level of logging. So we say any warnings, whether it's a debug or just an error. So the configuration can allow you to capture more information about the issue. So if that setting doesn't help, we may need to add additional logging to understand the issue. I'll probably contact ICE directly and see if they have.
We've contacted them as well, and they're just not seeing that submission through on their side at all. So.
Yeah, we'll continue to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any others? Going once. Twice. Oh!
Hi, Quincy Hilliard, Osaka Gas. Thanks for coming to this. This opportunity here is great. And I guess one of my questions is, what could the users do any differently or better on our side when it comes to submitting errors or tracking and logging these? What type of things could we do to help streamline the process of getting these type of issues corrected or fixed, whether in a quicker manner?
I don't know if you want to take that, Nazar, but I can start. But for sure, we ask you to really submit issues with as much information as possible, relative to the business requirement, the business case, where we can identify what it is you're trying to do through the system, relevant screenshots, and call outs to where the failure is occurring as much as possible, right? Then from there, there's a matter of investigating potentially with your actual database and stuff, but that is a next step. I think in terms of the initial reporting of the information, it's always, more is better, and whatever you can put into a visual is probably, pictures speak 1,000 words, right? Probably the best way to do it. There may be other information that I'm not thinking about.
No, when you covered it right, it's just the more information you give us, any collateral, documentation, screenshots. Sometimes we like to get the log files as well for both server side and just the the SQL logs and the server logs. And that will give us sometimes a little bit more insight of what's happening. But yeah, the more documentation you provide for us, the easier for us to reproduce the issue on our end. And we also support the typical process is to try to reproduce the issue in your particular version number, but they're also retested in a higher version, not necessarily outside the version number, but more like in a latest maintenance release of the exact version number. And they will see was that corrected already, reported by somebody else within the same version. If that's the case, typically they'll say you need to get that maintenance upgrade. So it doesn't really make it to my team because they'll say this has been resolved. So the recommendation would be to get the maintenance release to get that solution.
Regarding the support issues, like she reported to a partner like ICE, right? How do you test that when you don't have the trades or the ability to go through their production and to reproduce? Because maybe you try it in a test system, I don't know if you replay it and it works for you, but in the production environment, maybe something.
We have the relationship with ICE and CME and Triport, so we have access to their support team. But we typically have a summary file that gets generated. In some cases, if it's related to Market Connect or Trade Connect, I'm sorry, we typically ask for that summary file, and we have a tool that was provided by ICE and CME and Triport, similar concept, that will take the same summary file and really replay it to make sure can we reproduce the issue with your exact data set instead of us trying to just decode a trade and download it. Because we have our own test environment with ICE, but sometimes we need to know your exact trade. So in that case, we usually get the summary file and replay it to see can we reproduce that. But as I said, we have access to ICE support directly, and we have a good working relationship with them.
Okay, the question is this. So when you fix issues like this ICE Connect problem, you found a solution, you've either provided a class event user or a fix on their side. Do you communicate that to the other users? So in case someone else has this issue and they've submitted a ticket and they're waiting for a fix because they don't know that this has already happened before? What's the communication on things that you're fixing and class events that you're building out for users? Are you sending it to everyone or?
So my perception is that the support analyst will provide the release notes for every version. So let's say you're on 5.2 or 5.3, with every maintenance release, you should get a report. I'm assuming you get a monthly report or a weekly report of all your open requests. And you should also get a report, not you particularly, but the company. Every company receives, depending on who's the support analyst, they provide a report for all that company's open requests. We should also provide all the maintenance release that pertain to your version. So at least you'll be aware what got fixed, because with these release notes, we don't include a customer name or any other information. We'll just say, here's the type of issue that was fixed. And you evaluate, is that something pertain to me or not?
So kind of going back to what Ben said earlier, you developed something that you released yesterday on 3 scenarios that you were provided. Yet you're saying that the option portion that you needed was not included. Had the users known that you were working on that, then you would have been able to say, what about my piece?
Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult because obviously we cannot write a book on every issue. So now on this special case, because it's going to be an enhancement and it's going to be part of an official release, then you will have a 2-3 pages documentation. Like we did for liquids, it was actually a book. For derivatives, it was less, but we do document these things in more detail. So for that case, that will be covered. Now, on the release note, usually it's a couple of lines, is When settlement unit is set to original and the currency is this and that, then we didn't work, we fix it. So it's a little bit more cryptic. Usually when a customer thinks that it will be interesting for them, so you have actually the description of the issue and the resolution. Then they can contact support, and support does have more information. We need to review what we share because you may have things that you don't want to share. But that's usually how we do it. So it's part of the release notes, right? So it's in each version, you have an Excel file with actually all the issues which have been fixed with the number, the title, and the description.
So in the case of the issue we're talking about with the options and breaking them down, is that particular topic in the roadmap somewhere?
Yes, V23.
Okay, so that's going to be, again, going back to, as users, we want to know what's on that roadmap. Because if you know what's on the roadmap, you know what they're working on. And if you don't see your item on that roadmap, then we need to get a working group going. So, we'll have a voting process for it. Again, it's to be determined on how all that's going to work, so.
Yeah, and we spent actually this week in Dallas, we took the opportunity, we're all in the office and we actually reviewed the roadmap, discussed the functionality, discussed the stories with Nizar and team. And so that was the process of V23. Now, obviously, we only had the input of what was in Jira. So we looked at the use cases. We said, okay, we need to do that. That's for LNG, that's for liquids, that's for gas, that's for power. We draw that on the whiteboard and that became the requirements. But that's why we need your input.
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, this is kickoff of the AUG again. There has been no AUG for 3 years. So this is it. This is where our voice is now, so.
So this is Delali from Emerald Energy again. So just piggying back on the question, what more can we do to get some of our issues moving, going through quicker? I have a
slowly, just as to ask.
Can I make a comment? So in the initial AUG, we had the concept of if it's an AUG issue, it's something where we've built consensus. Because to me, from the software development side, it's like we're all just throwing requirements out and throwing them out there and saying, you guys fix all this stuff. So to make it more disciplined, we want our users to put tickets in to give the business rationale, not just the blurb that you see in the release notes, more the use case, and get a more disciplined process where we are communicating and sharing before we submit it to ION. Instead of just throwing it your way, we're talking amongst ourselves, and we're obviously working through our support analysts, but the idea was if it was an AUG issue, that meant that we had come to a consensus that this is a higher priority than our individual issues, and we've had the discussion and we understand the potential conflicts. So we're going to reduce the possibility that you fix one person's problem and break 3 other person's solutions. So that's why this is so critical, and I think that's the hope of the council and those of us who've been in the previous incarnation is that we can restart that. But that's where we need liaisons, we need meetings. The voting process, it sounds like it's worked pretty good in the European. And so to me, that's the missing piece, is that we have the expertise to write the requirements and build the use cases. We need to work on that and then be able to work with you guys to give you, instead of a list of 500 things, give you a list of maybe it's 20, maybe it's 25 that are well thought out, that are well scoped out. And we've looked at it and seen what conflicts that we can't kind of resolve, and we can then decide, ION do these things and these other things, we kind of have too many different versions of it, so we need to do it ourselves. So that's why this process is so important. We can use this process to really help.
Sorry. Slowly got it ripped right out of his hand.
I know, that's all right. But my question was, we have a bit of a frustration, being a little bit technical, I understand. Sometimes you have an issue and we report that and use a word recreate. But we get some things are just very random, like we just don't know how it happened, but
It happened, the evidence is in the database. I have one good example, but the support says, oh, we can't recreate this, so there's nothing we can do. I'm like, well, but it's there. So, so how can we do more since it's, my thing is you're the vendor, it's your system. If it's there, the responsibility seems to be on us to give evidence of how this happened, but it's not our system. We don't know how it's happening. Is there anything more that can be done to resolve such issues rather than we can't recreate it, so there's nothing we can do?
Well, I'm going to answer the first part, and I'm going to hand over to Nizar. Random usually doesn't really exist. So there is always a couple of conditions that actually creates that. Now, it's very hard also for us to imagine what these conditions are if we don't get that information from the customer. So what did you do to get to that? What was the other processes going on? Is there anything else? We can guess, but it's really hard. So this is the exact case we cannot recreate. Obviously, I think to go back to one of your questions, to speed up the process, if you give us the exact step to reproduce and we're able to and the database and the steps and the trade number and the valuation time and the valuation mode, then the support person can reproduce that in no time. It documents that and that goes straight to R&D, and then Nizar's team, and for example over there, can actually go and debug the code and find exactly what's going on. Now, if you said the valuation fails and you have 100,000 positions and it's harder, but.
No, I mean, to add to this, in some cases, support turns all custom class events off, because first they're trying to understand or investigate, is this a source code issue, or is it an extension that's causing that issue? In some cases, we cannot turn all these custom class events on because they're referencing DLLs that are not in our system, because you're communicating with a third party. So the typical default process is to turn custom class events off, test the system. Is this a core code issue? If it is, then it'll be easier to correct. That's the easy part. Once it breaks, we can reproduce it, debug it, fix it, and give you a patch. Yes, it is much harder when we cannot see what you're seeing. And that's why we rely on log files, or sometimes we have to turn some of these class events back on and say, okay, maybe this custom class event that's